We don't work for the state. We don't work for the families. We work for the dead. The dead tell us what happened.
All right, welcome to the Gopherwood Lounge. I am Arc Press senior editor DJ Butler. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, go to arc.press and sign up for the mailing list. Follow us at arc_press on X, all the stuff. Come on in out of the rain. I'm back with Rob Furey, Dr. Robert Furey, and very excited, Rob, to talk to you again today. I was saying that just before we hit record, like I must surely have given you the most short-changing introduction of your entire career last time. I just kind of said, Rob's done a bunch of stuff. Let's talk about spiders. And so I'd like to take a few minutes. We're going to talk forensic entomology tonight, I think, but I'd like to spend a little time and talk about you. I understand you're presently the chair of forensic science at St. Edward's University. So
That's right.
I'd love to hear maybe a little bit about St. Ed's and forensic science, and then I'd love to hear kind of how you got there.
Well, it's really, I think I used the term before. It's a long, strange road.
Yeah.
And it's kind of good that we did the last podcast before this one, because it was the spiders in Africa that got me here to Austin, Texas. And really it was a very small part of the spiders. I always worked with animal behavior, always worked with invertebrates, always did that. But one of the things that happened when I was in Africa, I had to figure out why all these spiders were living together in these large groups. So this is a little bit of a recap from before. Why were these spiders living together in large groups? And we had gone in with the idea that it had to do with large numbers of prey, so they could eat enough insects so they didn't have to eat each other. But there's an enormous amount of insects in the West African rainforest. I mean, I just cannot tell you that. So we had to quantify that, and we had to quantify it for numbers of insects and species of insects. So we had these artificial spider webs, several different sizes, that we would hang out. I would hang out because I was alone, but I would hang out in the forest and go in every day with, maybe there might have been 50 of these at any given cycle. I'd have to go in, count all the insects, identify all the insects, write it all down, clean them off, and get ready to come back out in another 24 hours. And these things would run for weeks at a time. So you can imagine, to look at hundreds and hundreds of insects that are on just one of those artificial spider webs. I got very, very good at identifying insects. When I left Africa, a bunch of stuff happened. Most of it was with spiders. I ended up getting recruited by an experimental college in Virginia at George Mason University. And then I got headhunted from there to start a new university in Pennsylvania. And when I was at that new university in Pennsylvania, one day this guy comes in. He said he was the local coroner. He had had a case that involved some insects, and his forensic entomologist was from China and didn't speak English well enough to be able to get on the stand. And was there anybody here that knew insects that could help him? So there I was. I had all this insect stuff that I'd been doing in Africa. So I put that on the table. He said, come on down. I went in there. I thought it was pretty cool. I worked on a murder case and ended up working. The Chinese forensic entomologist left, and I ended up being the forensic entomologist for Central Pennsylvania and Dauphin County, Pennsylvania for 20 years. I started a forensics program at the university that headhunted me, and then an opportunity came up here in Austin, Texas, for a chair of a new forensics department that needed to be rebuilt, and voila, here I am.
Wow, fantastic. So this is interesting, right? Because I assume that being the chair of forensic science means that the the department deals with more than just entomology.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, we deal with everything that you see on CSI. We do all that. Right now, unfortunately, it's a small department, and we're building it up. I've got a
Yeah,
lot of adjuncts.
yeah.
I just hired a new full-time. I don't mean to make a commercial for the department here, but
I'm interested.
we're building quick. We're building quick. So we're getting connections with local police departments, local FBI offices, local coroner's office, and ME offices, and trying to put together the same kind of relationship that I had in Pennsylvania again. And when that happens, then I think that the department will be really strong and robust and take off.
Yeah. Did you find so when was the first CSI? Like 2005 or something like
Oh,
that?
God.
Mid
Yeah,
aughts?
I don't know. I don't know the year, but it's caused a lot of problems for us.
Interesting. I was wondering if it had helped recruit people.
Oh, it does. But we have a name for it. It's the CSI effect. I don't know if you've heard that before, but CSI effect is you get these young, bright-eyed guys that come in there and they say, I can solve any crime in 45 minutes with a blue flashlight. And they think they think it's easy, but really it's not. It's a lot of careful work, a lot of interaction, a lot of group think. We figure stuff out, and lots of different people with lots of different expertise have to come together and build a crime and uh, reconstruct a crime, and that's what we do.
Yeah.
So yes, but we do deal with those shows, CSI Effect, absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. So do you end up being also like a consultant, or do you get consulted by like the Austin PD or law enforcement?
Well, not yet. I did, like I said, I did in Pennsylvania for 20 years.
Yeah.
I've made my presence known to local police departments and the
Yeah.
Department of Public Safety, so they know I'm here. If
Yeah.
they need me, they can call me. Um, the difference, being a forensic entomologist, I didn't have to do something every day or every week because if there's no bugs, they don't really call me,
Right.
and most of them don't have bugs.
Yeah.
So it's a different part of the process.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. We've kind of walked up right to the edge of what is forensic entomology. I want to come back to that. But first, one of the ways, so Arc Press editor-in-chief Tony Daniel gave me your name, and he said, "Man, this guy is just super interesting. He's done everything." And like this is fantastic. I'm very excited to know someone who's got an adventurous resume. One of the other things you have is you're a writer, right? So tell me about kind of your career, um, what you write. What should we know about Rob Furey as a writer?
Well, I mean, I had big plans that they didn't really pan out as much as I'd hoped, and that probably happens to a lot of people. I was living in France, and I found out about Clarion West in
Mm,
Seattle, and I went to Seattle for my turn at Clarion West, and I've had a small amount of success in short stories, written a couple novels, haven't really shown them to anybody.
mm,
You guys have a contest, you might be seeing one of them, but
awesome.
yeah. So yeah, and then I've sort of really turned my attention to science writing and popular science writing and educational science writing and then peer-reviewed stuff. So that's really where I've been focusing. But now, I'm a chair. I got myself a 9-month contract, so my life's a little bit different now. So I have a lot of time, and I still hope to devote to it.
Fantastic.
Hopefully, ChatGPT won't steal everybody's thunder, but I still plan to compete against the AIs.
Yeah, no, you should. My sense of it so far is that I do think that the worst, most hackneyed kind of writing can be replaced by an AI, but
Yeah.
I'm not at all convinced that an AI can write well, uh, yet.
Well, not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Cool. I'm jealous about Clarion. Just for the benefit of readers, that's like is it 6 weeks long?
Yes, 6 week science fiction writers boot camp.
Yeah, and you go in there, and is it you workshop a short story every week, or is it a novel over the course, or
No, it's not a novel. I did do a novel workshop at University of Kansas with kids. Um, but Clarion was as many short stories as you could pull off. I think
Hmm,
I got 14 short stories while I was there.
wow.
Um, uh, so we all had our assigned days when we were gonna get our story critiques, uh, but you don't get to critique as many stories as you want. I didn't get to do 14, uh, but there was those of us that would work in the evenings too and critique, extra extracurricular stories and stuff. So yeah, I mean, everybody there is very serious. Everybody there is really looking to hone their craft. Nobody's there really to fuck around, and we got a lot of work done, and it was
Yeah,
great. It was one of the best 6 weeks of my life, and I've had
yeah,
some pretty good weeks.
yeah, yeah. In gigantic spiders webs in West
Yeah,
African jungle, for example.
yeah.
Very cool. I am envious. I have not never got a chance to do that. Very cool. Um, all right. So forensic entomology. So entomology is that's insects, not all invertebrates, or
Yeah, study of insects.
study of insects. So here's like when you say this, what I'm imagining is there's a body, uh, based on the state of the insect, eggs that are hatching in it. Can you tell me how old it is, or can you tell me was it in the water for very long, or questions like this? What is
Well,
forensic entomology?
Well, first off, if it's been in the water, if it's been a floater, you don't need insects to tell you that.
Yeah.
That's nightmare fuel. You don't want to see that if you don't have to. It's really bad. There's terrible, terrible stories about autopsies that we did with floaters. But so for the insects, most of if we're looking to calculate PMI, which is post-mortem interval, that would be the time between when somebody died and when you discover the body. So most times when we're talking about this, we think about flies because flies are like little tiny robots and they always do the same thing. So you put
Hmm.
them on this body and you calculate the temperature, then you absolutely know how long it takes them to go from egg to first, second, and third instar, the maggots, first, second, and third instars into a pupa, and then into an adult. So if you know exactly how long that takes, it never wavers, depending on the species. So what we would do is we would go in and see what's going on. We would collect some of the insects that are there, bring them back to the lab, put them in a controlled chamber, and then see how long it takes for them to emerge as adults, and then work backwards and calculate PMI.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But it's and that works at the first couple of weeks.
Hmm.
After that, things start to get messy because then you get second generations of flies, right? But then you've also got insect succession going on where you have now waves of different kind of insects that come in at different states of decay of the body. So as the flies are in there consuming what they consume, they sort of change the environment and make it more suitable for beetles, and then the beetles come in and kick out the flies, and so then there's a whole show that goes on that you come in there. Now, once you get past the flies, um, it gets a little bit more difficult to calculate PMI, and your windows are bigger. So when you drop dead, if you drop dead out in the field, you've got fly eggs on you in 10 minutes and we start counting. So we can get pretty close. So the sooner we get there, the sooner we find those bodies, the more narrow is that window for calculating PMI. And the longer that body's been there, the harder it gets to pinpoint anything.
Yeah. Wow. Um, so, um, are there other things? I mean, it sounds like it's principally PMI, postmortem interval. Are there other kinds of conclusions you try to reach, or is it really just sort of a time of death focused inquiry?
Well, I mean, we can do all kinds of stuff with insects. We
Yeah.
can we can see if the person that died was doing drugs. We
Oh,
can
that's interesting.
we can see if the person that died had been poisoned.
Uh-huh.
We can even tell how long before somebody died that they'd done cocaine, because they do cocaine and then the body starts metabolizing the cocaine out, and you get these different metabolites as the body's getting rid of it. So once the body dies, that those changes stop. So whatever metabolites we find in the maggots, we can calculate what was going on and sort of corroborate time of death from the metabolites that are in those maggots.
Yeah. So sorry, does that lets you tell how long prior to death someone had done cocaine by how
Right,
far long they'd metabolized it?
right.
That's that's super interesting. I was thinking specifically of poison. I was wondering if, like in the maggots, you would find, look, this guy's something was in him because the flies are full of whatever it is. I don't know.
Yeah, yes, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Uh, Fantastic. So, I'd love to hear, like, I mean, I don't know, if you've got like specific examples or cases to talk about, or things that,
Sure.
like wild experiences in the field. I'd love to hear anything you've got that is, interesting to you to share.
Well, I can. So we had one case of a very wealthy family that had hired a nanny from South America, and they told her that she could have room and board, salary, all the benefits until the kids left for college.
Mm.
As long as she didn't get pregnant, they would cover her all of her expenses plus.
Yeah.
But I mean, being a young woman and a human being, she ended up getting pregnant, right? But she liked the benefits more than the baby, and she hid her pregnancy, and she gave birth alone in her bedroom, gave birth to a perfectly healthy baby boy, um, put him in a trash bag, rolled him up, and then put that trash bag in another trash bag and rolled it up and stuck it in the back of her closet.
Oof.
Um, 2 or 3 days later, now I'm not sure, this part didn't really involve me, so I'm not sure how this happened, but 2 or 3 days later, the grandfather of the kids that she was the nanny to was in her room and found the dead baby, and took the baby, opened the bags, had these open bags, freaks out, carries it outside, puts it outside in the front yard, and then calls the police. Right? So they found eggs on the baby during the autopsy. I get called in and I go to the morgue, pull the baby, um, and the baby's out of the cooler. And I asked them how long the baby had been out of the cooler, because as I'm looking at it, I saw the maggots hatching. The first maggots hatching, I was there. So calculate back 23 hours prior to my seeing that, the was my calculation for PMI. I added the number of hours that it was in the cooler, because that puts the eggs in stasis.
Hmm. Hmm.
So turned in my report. A couple days later, I'm sitting in my office at the university and the phone rings. I answer the telephone. Hello, you know, forensics department, blah, 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 what is going on? And this guy launches into F bombs and FUs and everything on the other side of the line. And he says, and then he ends up saying, what the hell's wrong with you? You didn't do this right. You fucked up my case. You've got to go back in and you got to look at this again and do it right. So I asked him, I said, well, because at this point, my only interaction with this case was a baby on
Yep.
a table. That's it. I didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
So that's when I found out about the grandfather and the bag. And when he opened, I said, "Okay, well, tell me." He said, "This baby's been dead for at least 3 days." And then he told me the rest of it. I said, "Well, when did he open the bag?" And he told me the day before. And I said, "Okay, so that is about 28 hours ago." He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "That's exactly what I said." So as soon as he opened the bag, the insects found it and laid eggs. That's what happened.
No.
And then we went out for a beer, and he was very happy because he he thought that the defense was going to have a field day to come in if they found me and found my
Right.
report, that they were going to be able to cause some trouble. But in fact, they didn't have any trouble at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everything fit in. That was actually my first big case that had something really exciting happen.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty dramatic. So it's a little episode of CSI, like there's a little twist in the middle, and
Oh
like,
yeah,
how
there
can
was
that be
drama.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the detective all angry. Um, so that's interesting. Like how? So I don't know a lot about flies. So how should I think about this? Um, I mean, I guess she had these plastic bags and the trash bags. They weren't sterile, but there's just aren't fly eggs in there, and she just put the baby quickly enough in the bag that
Well, the
that
baby was alive. I mean,
yeah,
the flies wouldn't don't lay eggs on living things.
I see.
So when the baby went in the bag, it was alive, and then it was, for all intents and purposes, it was sealed.
Right.
So once it was open, then they could get at it.
Got it. Because you're not
And
measuring. Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, like, it's we get some weird stuff like that when we have bodies that are wrapped in, um, like in a carpet or something and thrown out in the woods, and the insects can clearly come in from the ends, but it makes strange patterns. And because these bags were all wrapped up, they didn't even have that much.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's okay. So it's not that like I'm not swimming in like a universe of floating fly eggs. It's that, once there's a body, a fly will land, and they're
Yeah,
just so ubiquitous. So that's
yeah.
interesting. Rolled in a carpet. So you're gonna get like fly. You're gonna get like the soles of the feet, maybe, and the head, crown of the head.
Well, I mean, when the flies come and lay eggs, they can't. The maggots can't. I mean, they want to get inside, right? That's where all the good gooey stuff is, and all the protein that they want is inside, and they can't really get in through the top of your head.
Yeah,
So they get in through openings in your body.
got it.
So your eyes and
Uh-huh.
your nose and your mouth, or wounds from a gunshot or a knife. This is how they get in.
Yeah,
So they might be on you and crawling around, but they can't really pull it off. So yeah, so it changes the dynamic. But they do need those places to get in, because if they don't have them, they don't have the material, they don't have the artillery to get through your skin. They just can't.
yeah. Uh, Interesting. So, if you're called in, there's a body, you're like looking at the wounds, you're looking at or maybe it's obvious based on just you're looking at it, you can see the maggots. Uh,
Right, right. So I can see maggots, I can see eggs. For the baby, if I had not seen those maggots hatching, I would have collected the eggs. Right? And then I would have had to go through a lot more trouble to work the PMI. But since I was there at the moment, it was fine. Otherwise, I would have had to sit there and watch and watch and watch, or put them in a chamber in my lab and run it through that way. As it was, I was lucky, if that's the word, lucky enough to see it.
it is a pretty grim, right? There's a pretty grim aspect of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one thing I always tell my students. These students, they come in there, and they're gung ho and they're all excited, and I say, you know what, if you come in and you don't think that this is harsh or gross or hideous or any of those things, it's not the job for you. And if you ever stay in there and you don't and you stop feeling all those things, then you need to get another job. I mean, I remember a very tough case. We had a baby that was beaten to death with a video game controller because the baby, well, 2 years old, because the 2 year old had asked for a cup of water and the mother's boyfriend was in the middle of I don't know, fighting a boss or something. I don't know,
Right.
and beat the baby to death because he lost the round. Um, and so we have this little kid just on the table, just a mess because this grown man did this. And the coroner, who it was probably 70 at the time, he's been there a long time, and the well-seasoned detective who was on the case were standing there in the autopsy theater, and they were both bawling. I mean, and I tell my students all the time, if that's not you, then this is not the job for you. Because
Yeah.
you'll lose your humanity if you let that happen, I think.
Yeah. That's yeah. Wow. Um, so I mean, kind of on that thread, like like from your point of view, like I mean, obviously, you know, I don't know, obviously. Do you think about this as, hey, I am working to help bring justice for victims? I want to make sure that the right person, the engine of justice here is working, and what I can do is get the science right to make sure that the sort of right person gets justice. Like how
Yeah,
how do you
absolutely.
deal with that?
I mean, the way, collectively at the coroner's office where I worked, I mean, we say in every situation is we don't work for the state. We don't work for the families. We work for the dead. And the dead tell us what happened.
Mhm.
So we we just we look at it and we tell the story that the dead tell us. Now the state can do what they need to do with the story. The families and victims' families, they can all do with what they need to do, but we only work with the dead.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, yeah, time. Look, I'd love to explore this interesting question. Maybe we've already exhausted it, but time of death, toxins or drugs. Are there other stories or other examples of sort of maybe surprising things you might be able to tell based on the flies or other insect behavior around a corpse?
Well, we can look at we can use flies in particular to tell if someone has been physically abused,
Oh,
because then you can have open wounds that then are infected with maggots.
interesting.
A lot of modern medicine now is going back to using maggots, and we know that in World War I, in trench warfare, a lot of these guys in the trenches were very dirty and help was far away. If they got a cut, they were happy to have maggots in the wounds because it prevented them from getting gangrene, but it also prevented the wound really from closing. So we can use that to look at the extent of like abuse of animals. The
Mm.
collars are too tight, or some asshole puts a spike, one of those spike collars in reverse on a dog and
Oh,
yanks it around. I mean, we can do that too. I mean, not at the coroner's office, that we didn't do with, with stuff with animals, but it's the same principle.
yeah.
And forensic entomology is used in those cases too. But it can, entomologists can go into restaurants. Entomologists can go into food processing plants. I mean, you don't want to know how much insect parts is in your peanut butter. I mean, so there's entomologists going looking at all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So sorry, just to make sure I'm following this though on the abuse. Your point is you might look at a corpse and say, "Hey, look, we
No,
here's
not a
the time."
corpse, not a corpse.
Okay,
This would be living.
on a living person. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
and you could, okay, got it. I was thinking you were talking about, hey, I can distinguish the wounds of their that caused death from wounds that didn't cause death but were previous. Um,
Well, that would be for the medical examiner to do that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, not the entomologist.
yeah.
So in those cases, I could go in there and talk about, what kind of insects were in different places on that body, but I couldn't do what you're asking. That would be for the you know the ME.
The medical examiner. Yeah. Um, you talk about species of flies. How many species, um, I assume different localities maybe, I mean, I don't know much about flies. So, like in Austin, I assume you have sort of a catalog. Here are the 7 species of flies we deal with. And maybe in
Sure.
Pennsylvania, it's a different set.
Yeah, I mean, so mostly we're interested in you know, a couple different genera of flies, but there's species of flies in those genera all over the world. And there's forensic entomologists that put out these papers everywhere that says, all right, here, the species that are present here do this with these environmental conditions. Boom, and then we have that, and we can match that in the lab. Um, but yeah, so we have different species of flies. We even have different species of insects from urban and rural areas. We had one case where we found a guy behind a dumpster dead, and the insects that were on him when we looked at him told us that this guy was from about 50 miles out into farm country, and
Oh,
that
fantastic.
that he'd been killed out there and then carried into the city and dumped in an alley. And he'd been killed out there long enough that he had these insects on him.
Yeah. So that's another great example of stuff you can tell.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Dumped versus killed here.
yeah,
Super interesting. So the conditions you mentioned temperature before. I mean, are there other conditions that change the time of development of a fly larvae? I mean, is it like humidity, rain, other kinds of
yeah.
factors?
Sure, sure. So now we get to talk a little bit about one of my favorite subjects again. We talked about last time was emergent properties.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So one of the things that maggots do is that they live in these when they go in the body, they sort of they spread out and they're everywhere over the body. But by the time they get to the second instar, there's 3 instars. When they get to the second instar, they form a maggot mass, a clump. And when they do this, they can control temperature, they can control humidity.
Interesting.
Yeah, they can do all these things, not metabolically, but mechanically.
Hmm.
So, I mean, one of the things I have my students do when I try to explain this is if you just rub your hands together like that for 2 seconds, you feel the heat, right? So the hotter it is, the quicker these guys can can mature and get out and lay eggs somewhere else. So they do this and they rub this. They do this and they increase their rate of metabolism. They speed up their rate of development. So it's not just the ambient temperature that we're looking
Yeah.
at, but it's also the temperature that these guys can get up to in those maggot masses.
Oh, and we should imagine not 2 hands, but like a clump of 500 maggots on an open wound or something like that.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the maggot masses are more going to be internal, not external. So
Oh,
you're gonna
interesting.
so they're gonna be looking for the tastiest places first. So they're gonna hang out on the liver, and then they're gonna go down to the kidneys and move around and get the organs first. So so when the maggots have eaten all that, they might hang around on the muscle a little bit, but beetles are much better at consuming muscles, and so that's what we see there. But
Interesting.
the maggots are the inside, and so that clumping serves not just to control things like temperature and humidity. Also, it reduces individual chances of predation too. There's all kinds of other dynamics going on there. But excuse me, come on, get away. So it also prevents the maggots from getting. I think I said Preyed on, yeah, that prevents the individuals
Yeah,
from getting preyed on by changes the probability. So they're not just all spread out. A bird can't come up and look at one and pick it. So when they're all there together and they're all squirming around, it's much more difficult for the bird to pick one
yeah.
because by the time they see one, it's already moved to the inside of the ball, and then they have to pick another one and then pick another one. So it's much more difficult. Um,
So if you're observing
Alternatively,
this, sorry, if you're looking
huh?
with your eye, so if you're looking with your eye, like you can see them moving. These are moving
Oh
fast.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a squirming writhing. How long do the maggots get while they're in a maggot form? It depends on the species, I guess.
Well, yeah, it depends on the species, and it depends on the instar. So of
Okay.
course, the larger the higher the instar, the bigger the maggot. But one of the things that's kind of interesting about them is that they can't really take care of themselves. If you put one maggot in there, it would die. It would You could give a maggot an entire carcass and it would starve to death. It could not eat. So part
So,
of the drawback of this immersion property is that they sort of chew and digest for each other and they can't really do it for themselves. So they have these little scimitar things on the front and they sort of go through they swim through the meat like this and chew and exude the digestive fluids. Then the next ones come along and eat what the previous one left behind. Right?
fantastic.
So they really need these large groups to be effective.
Yeah. And so on the point of the emergent behavior is it's not like they're doing this, they're not choosing this. The maggot's not saying I'm going to
Oh
feed.
no.
They just have a very simple reflex. Uh
Yeah.
and but the result is that when you put a pile of them together, they feed each other, they defend each other from predators. Uh
Passively defense. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They
Yeah.
make it harder for the bird or whatever it is to come select a grub. Uh,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And well, one other thing that is I personally find really interesting about this is um, the large maggot masses are very effective at exploiting these carcasses as resources. They're so good that they actually attract other maggots, and they don't care what species they are. So you have these maggot masses of multiple species that are all working together for the same goal.
Yeah. And are they? I mean, they're all flies. This is all during like the first 2 weeks
Oh
of the.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're all flies. They're all flies. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, Interesting. And then I guess the flies basically. I haven't thought about like the life cycle of a fly in a long time. At certain point, the maggot becomes a fly and flies off.
Uh-huh.
Um, but at which point beetles are moving in to eat the mussel.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of overlap, but yes, that's what's going on. So yeah, so the at the third instar, what the third instar maggot is going to do is to suddenly realize that it's ready to turn into a fly and it needs to pupate for a long period of time. And when it pupates, it's like a caterpillar in a cocoon.
Yeah,
So it leaves the body, leaves the carcass, and starts taking off to do two things. Number one, it's rubbing all of the juice and all the smelly chemicals off of itself as it goes, so it's harder to find, you know, chemically. And then it gets far away from the carcass so that anything that's looking around the carcass for food would overlook it. And then it's going to hide itself somewhere in some detritus. So you have, if the carcass is this big at a certain moment, you have this diaspora of all these maggots that go off in all these directions um, when they're ready to pupate. In fact, that reminds me of a story.
tell me.
Yeah. So we got called in to investigate a guy that turned out to be dead,
Okay.
and he died in his room. And the owners of the home rented him the room, and he was getting a check that was coming into the house, and they had agreed that the check would just go right to them, and they would just sign it and deposit it for in return for his room
Sure.
and board. Well, his friends noticed that he wasn't showing up. So we go over there to this house, and this older people were sitting in the living room and they go, well, yeah, we don't know, where he went or what's going on. And meanwhile, the house smells like, I mean, you can't, I mean,
Oh,
you know what death smells like and
yeah.
decay. The whole house just smelled like this, and it's a horrible smell, and they didn't notice it, right? They
Mm.
said they didn't smell anything. They didn't know what's going on. So we went upstairs to his room, and out from underneath his room is a wave of third instar maggots running down the hallway to go hide. And they didn't notice any of this.
Wow.
None of it. At least that's what the claim was,
Yeah.
you know, and they got away with it too. And I was livid. I was livid that they
Wow.
got away with that, but they did.
So a third instar. So at that point, based on I mean, that means you're talking about he's been dead for a couple weeks or
Oh
more.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, wow. It's pretty grim. So the this is, I guess this is a story. I'm gonna tell you a story. I was in Brooklyn, hanging out with a sister-in-law, and met a friend of theirs who'd been with the Salt Lake PD, and showed me a photo on her phone. I should have shared this a few minutes ago. You're talking about maggots. Well, the Salt Lake PD at one point had arrested a guy who was homeless. And when they pulled his boot off, the the foot basically ended at the heel, and then there was just a clump of maggots, and then bones, and basically he was apparently only alive because of the maggots and because
Right.
he had kept the boot on. So that like the boot held the maggots in. They sat there and ate the flesh, right? And so they like had to immediately go amputate at the knee or something. But like I saw the photo of this like foot, and it had these kind of, I guess, rotten, but like intact toes at the end, and then the whole middle part of the foot was just bone, and these swarming clumps of mag. I think he was. I mean, he was a homeless guy. I think he was probably a junkie, and right, maybe out of
Now,
touch with.
how long ago was this?
It would have been. It was pre-COVID. It might have been like 2018, 2019, something like that.
Yeah, we had some stuff called crocodile going around. Do you know if anybody remember anybody saying that word, crocodile?
I don't remember, but it might have been. Tell me about crocodile. What's that?
So it's this drug made out of all kinds of horrible things, and I think if I'm right, it even includes like petroleum, and then they inject it, and wherever you inject it, it just kills you, and so it just kills, and then the pieces fall off, and you're open, but you get these horrible scabs that look like scales, so you look like you're turning into a crocodile.
Crocodile Man, yeah.
Yeah. But it reminds me of this guy. You're probably right. Those maggots kept him alive for the same reason that the soldiers in the trenches were kept alive. They ate all the tissue that would be rotting because they
Yeah,
don't eat living tissue.
yeah.
So anything that was rotting that could have turned into gangrene and gone systemic, they were taken care
They
of.
eat it right off. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
got a wound that never heals, but also you don't die of gangrene.
and some serious heebie-jeebies. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think if you're living in the trenches in the Great War, I think you'd have a lot of heebie-jeebies.
yeah. You probably a lot of reasons for it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that was I only saw the photo, but like that was striking enough that I wrote it into a book. I had a sort of insane um character who at the end his foot was turned out to be rotting off. Anyway, um, yeah, I don't remember crocodile, but man, that's people will do crazy stuff to get high. Holy cow.
Yeah, yeah. It's not nice to see.
Yeah. So, all right. So look, this one group of people who watches this channel is writers. This is lots of people watch this channel. But if somebody wanted to learn more about this, you mentioned doing some writing for kind of popular science. By any chance, have you written an introduction to forensic entomology, or is this part of your plan?
Well, in fact, I'm in the process of writing a textbook on medical legal death investigation right now.
Oh, fantastic.
So hopefully the first or second draft will be done by the end of the summer. And forensic entomology will certainly be in there. So have I written a book only about forensic entomology? No, I have not. I've done some popular science articles.
Yeah.
And there's some on Medium. I don't know if you've heard of Medium, but I've put some stuff up on Medium.
Okay. And that's
Um,
under the name Robert Furey.
yeah, Rob Furey. Yeah,
Rob Furey. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, there's stuff out there. But my biggest one I think is going to be this. I'm going to call it my forensics opus, which will be the medical legal death investigation. And that is that's a little bit about what you alluded to at the beginning, where it's going to encompass a lot of the different things that are happening in these in solving a crime. I mean, one of the things that I really enjoyed about solving crimes is the part where everybody stands around and throws ideas out and into the middle of the circle and either bolts them up or shoots them down, and then we whittle them down and whittle them down, and everybody's using their own different uh, speciality to figure out exactly how to reconstruct this crime. And that was one of my favorite things to do. And so I have a little bit of familiarity with all those different areas, and that's what the book is going to be doing.
That's very cool. Do you
Mm.
have a title?
No,
Okay. Do you have a
I'll let you know when I do.
I mean, do I'll post it. I'll post it in our mailing list. 100%. This is exactly the kind of book that I think I'd probably know 100 writers who would go, "Oh my gosh, I need to own that book."
Well, it's funny that you say that. One of the things that I was trying to do at St. Ed's was convince them that we should do a forensic workshop for writers.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
It's specifically for writers that want to come in and get it right, get the CSI effect right. Just come in and we just do that and cover all the basics, and then any special questions that they had, cover that too. Like do it for a week or 2 weeks or something. I'm trying to set that up right now.
I think that look, thrillers, mysteries, police procedurals are a big enough
Right.
genre. Even Western writers, right? Even by the way, somebody writing fantasy novels might be like, you know what? Actually, this is a great. This is something I ought to have some familiarity with.
Anybody that wants to know about, so just for me, anybody that wants to know about stages of decay or forensic insect or necrophagous insect succession on a body. I mean, those are all good things to have in a story
Yeah,
because they're real.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's this interesting challenge, right? I mean, the writer's always faking something because you don't know everything, right? And sometimes you can tell as a reader, and you go, "Oh, this is a writer who has no idea how a corporation works," because you get to the scene where and like it's obviously just bluffing, right? Or this is a writer who's never looked at the night sky because the moon doesn't do that, right?
right, right.
Um, so yeah, I think that's a really cool idea. And again, man, you set that up, and I'll happily share that.
Well, I'm going to pass that on next week because my boss thinks it's a good idea, but the outside departments that arrange for those things looked at me like I had two heads. They didn't think it was a very good idea at all. I think it's great.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
take it. Shit, I'd do it myself.
I would too. You could do it like first of all, you could advertise at something like Armadillo Con, right? Where you can reach 500 or 1,000 writers. You could even, depending on how long it was, you could do it like around Armadillo Con. I don't know if that's like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You could say, look, come in a day earlier, Thursday. We're gonna have a 10-hour day. We're gonna give you a crash course on, you know, these three subjects.
I wonder if Armadillo Con would be interested in us doing it for them.
Yeah, maybe, right? Maybe even if it was I mean, you can imagine all kinds of arrangements, right? Like people can pay $50 for the extra day. We'll advertise through Armadillo Con. We'll give you share some of the proceeds with you, right? Or who knows? Um, yeah, I think that's really cool.
Well,
Uh,
what I was trying to do was get enough money and support so that writers wouldn't have to pay a penny.
uh,
You know,
of course, that's
so
awesome.
Yeah, then then you get writers that apply and you get applications. You can see the ones that would really do something because there's going to be plenty of people. Like if I did it at Armadillo Con, plenty of people would come in and sit there because it was cool and never do anything with it.
Sure,
But
sure.
yeah, with the application, I would really, I could really get at some writers that wanted to do it, and that's why I wanted to pay for everything.
Yeah, yeah. And if they had, if it wasn't just look, hey, here's an hour during which the rest of the programming is slow, I'll sit down in this thing. But if it was like, look, it's a separate day. It's free, it's covered, but like you have to make an effort to come out for the day. That's going to weed out people who are just purely, idly curious.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, like a test run, a 1 day test run through Armadillo Con.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think it's cool, Rob. I think that'd be a lot of. I'd be very interested, actually, myself.
Are you going to go Armadillo
I've
Con?
never been to Armadillo Con. I won't be there this year. I do want to go. The challenge is that ARC has already got a guy who's local and known and part of Armadillo Con, and so it's easy for David F. Sharirod to go. So I need to, uh, I need to elbow my way in there. But you set this up, and I'll go out of my way to do it.
All right, will do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So if somebody said, "Hey, this is all interesting. I am 18, I'm 17, I'm in high school, looking at college. Uh, what would you advise someone to do to like what should they be studying I mean, I guess even in high school, but in college to get into forensics or forensic entomology in particular?"
Well, I mean, forensic entomology in particular is easy. I would take, I would, well, the courses that helped me, of course, were um, arachnology and entomology and ecology, general biology, all the whole animal ologies that you can manage to take. Um, that's what I would do. I mean, but there are programs that I'm teaching now that where undergraduates go in and it's more focused than what I did. So that you can get there from a whole bunch of different routes. Personally, I think the route I got here is better because I got more diverse and then I focused it when
Mhm.
I needed it to be focused. Um, because I certainly never took any courses in forensic entomology.
Sure.
And then the only forensics courses that I took once I started being a forensic entomologist in Pennsylvania, I started taking all the certificate courses at the state police and the local police and whatever local FBI courses were being taught up. I just took them all. Um, so I don't know. You could say that I was playing catch up or filling in. I don't know. Um, with my students now, the ones that I have that are in forensics in the forensics program, I tell them, take your chemistry, take your physics, take your biology, take all the science courses you can. Because at the end of the day, forensics really isn't its own study area. What it really is an application of all the other sciences
Mhm.
to crime and law, because forensics is the interaction with science and law, and it doesn't specify what science. It doesn't
Mhm.
specify any of it. You can imagine, forensic astronomy, where you have a picture of a crime scene where some serial killer takes a picture of a body at night and sends it in and tells you, well, I killed this guy on a certain date, and some smartass goes, wait a minute, that's the wrong phase of the moon. Well, you've just done forensic astronomy.
Yeah.
So any science that you can apply to solving a crime is forensics.
Yeah. Super interesting. So the program at St. Ed's, does it award bachelor's degrees? Is it master's programs?
Bachelor's degree right now. We're probably going to try for a master's. I've only been here a year.
Yeah.
So we're gonna probably try to get a graduate program going in there. Right now, we spend a lot of time making sure that the students are ready to go into other graduate programs, and that's a whole different set of suggestions and planning and all that stuff that's involved with going to graduate school and the best ways to do it. Um, I tell anybody that's watching and interested to go to graduate school, what you have to do is find somebody that's doing something that you're interested in and get to know them on a personal level before you send an application to that school, because then you've got an advocate. And most people don't do these applications with advocates. And when you've got an advocate, you're 10 steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, interesting.
So yeah, I would make sure that any of my students find somebody that's doing something that they're interested in, that they want to do, and then get a relationship up with that person, whether it's on LinkedIn or, letters. For me, I wrote letters to my advisor, and then I ended up having lunch with her at the Smithsonian, and that's what clinched it. And then I went off to Africa a year later.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how you do it.
Wow. Okay. Well, fantastic. Super interesting stuff, Rob. Is there anything you think we ought to have talked about that we didn't talk about, or any story what you're thinking, man, I really want to tell this one story, we never got to it?
Well, I can tell a funny story.
I'd love to hear a funny story.
All right. So one of the things that we do with the forensic entomologist and the forensic students in general in Pennsylvania was we had this program that we ran for years and years and years called the Pig Dig. And the way the Pig Dig worked is we would have a group of students that they would be given a 150-pound dead pig, and they would have to go. We had a farm, and we would go onto this farm, and their job was to hide that pig any way they wanted, hide the pig. And then 6 months later, or however much time, whatever cycle Pig Dig it was, we had another group of students that were the detectives that had to go in and find the pig. So this ran for many years, and most of the time, what they find out, it's really hard to hide a 150-pound pig. And even though it's hard to hide it, it's also hard to find it. So it's difficult on both ends, whether you're a murderer or a detective. And most of the times people dig a hole and they think they're going to dig a deep hole, but they never do. It's always a shallow grave.
Yeah.
But one year we had some students that they decided they weren't going to dig a hole at all. So they tied a rope around the 150-pound pig's neck and hoisted it up into a tree about 20 feet off the ground, and then tied it off. And that's how they were going to hide the pig. Well, if you remember, when the maggots go in, they don't go in through the skin, right? They go in through all holes that are already there. So for this pig that's hanging in a tree, the maggots are going in the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, and right in through the bottom, right? And when they ate their way into the bottom of the pig, all the guts they just came out. They came out in one big wave. And if that wasn't bad, and now nobody saw this, of course. We didn't find
Right.
out that this had happened until all the neighbors' dogs found it and rolled in it. And so all the dogs were rolling in this decaying pig organs, and then they all went home, and all the neighbors came over all at once and started screaming at us about this. So we had to change the rules of the Pig Dig from then on. No more hanging them up in the trees. And
I have two dogs. This is exactly what they do. And I have to know where every dead animal, every, dead raccoon or bird is when I walk them, or they will leap over and hurl themselves upon it and try and grind it into the pelt.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I 100% can see this.
yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. Pig Dig.
Yeah, so we had to change the rules of the Pig Dig after that. Before that they could hide it however they wanted. After this, they had to get approval.
Yeah, okay.
So
That's awesome. Rob, fantastic. Very cool story. Very funny story. Thank you for joining us, and for all the listeners also, thank you for being here. And remember that the humans win in the end.